Well, that's a big question, and there are many ways of talking about it. For example, in the realm of science, Einstein talks about how when he was playing Mozart string quartets in his youth, his imagination created a lot of things that then became the organic kernels, the seeds of his theories. So when he's thinking about relativity and the speed of light and what happens when this happens and space and time, that's all in his imagination, right? And so that's an example in science. Personally, it can mean different things for different people, but mostly it's being able to envision, in your mind, possibilities.
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that shaped their lives, inviting us all to reflect and grow together. Today we're joined by Christopher Kaufman, a fantasy author and composer whose vibrant imagination has been a guiding force since childhood. With a doctorate in music composition, Christopher weaves together storytelling and symphonic music, creating immersive experiences that reminds us of the transformative power of art. Let's dive into Christopher's world and discover the quote that has inspired him on his creative journey. Okay, tell us your name and your favorite quote.
Hello, my name is Christopher Kaufman. I'm an author, composer, presenter, creative artist, and performer. And my quote is that I believe in the transformative power of imagination, especially as demonstrated in the fine arts and the great fantasy stories that we all love. I think of imagination as the highest function of our minds. It gives us art and music and scientific theories and helps us envision a better life and future for ourselves. I believe that if we really live and see and hear life with imagination in the highest sense there, our daily lives are more rich and full. It comes to life in my work. In my music, concert music, and my film music, or my stories, my epic fantasy tale, Tales of the Ocean City, for example, where there's a large-scale process of working through conflict and reaching resolution in all kinds of imaginative ways. The same way that, in music, you have a harmony, like a complexity or a dissonance that resolves. In the same way, my story is continually doing that. And I hope that gives people, something that they can take with them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. You say your quote is, I believe in the transformative power of imagination. Okay. And you did mention, you said our lives could be better daily if we used, a little imagination. We added, some spice of imagination to it. Can you give us an example of what it would mean to add a spice of imagination to our daily life? What would that look like?
Certainly. Well, let's say you're walking down the street and you see a flower working its way through the cement to reach the air and the light. Well, to me, if you see that with your imagination, you see it as a quest, an adventure quest in a way, or almost a mythological quest where the flower remembers that what is now a parking lot was a beautiful forest, like Eden, like a beautiful full forest filled with life and trees, and now it's, tarred over, So you can imagine what that is, and then you can apply that kind of thinking to everything around you. Let's say you're in a classroom or a board meeting, and the person speaking is saying things maybe you already know, and you're kind of bored, and instead of just being depressed by that, you can see, in the light or the darkness behind the person, an imaginative scenario. You can turn the person into one of the characters from your story, like an orc or a monster, and imagine aliens come and taking him away. And that person will not know quite why you're smiling when you listen, but you know why. Why. And you carry that within you. In a fantasy story, all of the heroes and monsters and histories and quests, they're all metaphors for our daily life. And when you're really imbibing that and working it through yourself as you go through life, you can just turn everything into something beautiful and glorious, And you can imagine anything for yourself that you can do, you can accomplish.
Well, you did mention your stories, music, and what you do professionally. How does that play out for you personally, with imagination, of course?
Well, I have a lot of storytelling involved in all my works. One thing I do is I create environmental pieces with soundscapes created from hundreds of natural sounds and orchestral sounds with live players. And they tell a story. They bring people through a linear progression from the beginning to the end. It's a very powerful environmental message within it. But of course, a very direct way is my fantasy epic, Tales of the Ocean City, which is the story of a young civilization turning the corner into the future, like we are in our lives. But first, the Ocean City citizens must face an enemy from their deep past. In fact, it goes all the way back to the island they evolved on, ages past, and the creatures that lived there called the Vorm, who were at first peaceful, but then they transformed into a negative force when a new hive king took over. They have a hive mind situation, and they forced the people off of the island, and they had to live on rafts and boats in the middle of the ocean, and they were beset by storms like, we are in our lives, and monsters from the deep and sea beasts and sharks and all this. And then they are seen and heard from afar by a race of beings that I call Parianths, which are a kind of telepathic Pegasus creature. And the Parianths rescue the people and take them and deposit them at the base of a vast volcano, which they call Plathanta, and they worshipped as a god for many years. And from the belly of this volcanic mountain, they craft and delve the ocean city itself. So they've gone through this transformation. Now, the story that I'm telling takes place like 1,000 years later. And they're about to turn into a future that's very different based on discovery and adventure and exploration. But they have to face this enemy from their deep past, the Vorm. The main characters are a young man named Harloot and his lifelong companion Vespucian, who is a Parianth, and they're bonded. They speak together telepathically, and they're like family, and they have a really close relationship. And so they're traveling to the ocean city. He's sort of leaving his island, Spire, his island where he grew up, and he's going to join the ocean city. He sees the princess Brynlin and her Parianth bond, Jigla, and he's going over to say hello, and that's when they're attacked by the Vorm warriors, these wild creatures. And so the first book, Sky Battle, it's a long, beautifully visceral battle scene in the sky, and it ends with a very uplifting and positive conclusion. And so it's all working itself out through this. I discovered that I was having all kinds of autobiographical elements worked into this story, and how I, in my life, resolved conflicts from my early life and found this new place that I'm into now and all this kind of thing. So I think people going through that whole process would experience that and be uplifted by it and maybe apply it to their own lives, you see.
Yeah.
And of course, I do want to mention that they're written stories with graphic illustrations for every page with color and all this stuff. And I've created audio albums filled with symphonic music and narration and sound design, and they all go together into one immersive experience, creating a real vibrant experience for the listener reader, which enhances the process.
Well, I know you gave us examples of what it means to live life with a little imagination, right? And with an extra imagination. But the word imagination, most of the time, why we might feel like we know what it means, it's a big word, imagination.
Yes.
Right? So I want us to look at it like, it's a math uh, um assignment or homework. We could solve examples and say, okay, this is how you do it. Example one, example two, example three. But it's not just in solving examples. We need to really understand the principle in regarding the matter topic, such that even though the examples or the exercises were to change in the future, we don't have a problem solving them, because then we're like, okay, yeah, this principle, this principle, this principle. But then sometimes we're like, okay, this exercise doesn't look like the first three we were taught in class, so we cannot solve it. So what was imagination in the simplest of terms?
Well, that's a big question, and there are many ways of talking about it. For example, in the realm of science, Einstein talks about how when he was playing Mozart string quartets in his youth, his imagination created a lot of things that then became the organic kernels, the seeds of his theories. So when he's thinking about relativity and the speed of light and what happens when this happens and space and time, that's all in his imagination, right? And so that's an example in science. Personally, it can mean different things for different people, but mostly it's being able to envision, in your mind, possibilities. And those can be for yourself, they can be for society, they can be large scale or in a very small personal scale, just getting through your day.
Yeah, yeah. Is there when you explain the imagination concept just right now, I was trying to like break down the words back to its original um basic term, which is like imagination. Imagine. What does it need to imagine? From the word image, what does it mean to create image, to create pictures, to create like entities, and then stories, even videos itself are just moving images, and it in itself, it's to create, to okay, it's to create, as you said, possibilities. It's to create, you see, you gave the example of, okay, we could look at this and then see what is not there. And yeah, and just entertain the thoughts that, okay, this could be this could be something else. And it's how do I explain that? It's not a matter of thinking random thoughts. It's a matter of
There
looking
you
at
go.
circumstances all around and having a way to paint, using them as canvas to paint um, in your mind. Because the thing about imagination is that except you work towards creating that thing you've imagined in your head, that's when we can actually see what you imagine. Because usually it's formed in our head. Where like the stories you mentioned, like all these, it was first formed in your head. You're like, okay, and then you decide to write it, and now we can read it if we want to read it. And same thing with music, painting, all that. It's usually in the head, and then I want to do something to like bring it to life for other people to see, to enjoy, and partake of the experience.
Well, one way is for you to engage in an art form, whichever you have experience in or want to try. And when you take an image in your mind and bring it to life, whether it's words or a painting or music, you are then giving yourself, you're teaching yourself, you're giving yourself that experience, even if it's very simple, you know. It doesn't mean you have to be an accomplished artist, professional or something, but just if you're doing that, then you're going to see everything differently around you. If you paint a still life, you're going to look at your kitchen and you're going to feel each object. And, very simply, give yourself that experience, teach yourself how to manifest what's in your imagination, in your mind. The applications can be, infinite for you.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, I notice that it's imagination is one of the things that as kids we had a lot of it. It was I remember when I was very very young. After watching a movie, I would go on and then produce my own movie in my head and play out the role of all the characters. It was really fun. But when we grow up, so for some reason, it's as if we forget who we are. Like it's as if we lost now we will become something we cannot even recognize. And I don't understand why is that.
It's daily life and stress and school, which can, force people to conform to certain ways of being, which are not from the perspective of an imaginative life necessarily, right? And trying to fit everyone into a square peg or whatever it is. Then there's stress, and then there's having to work and all these kind of things. And then there's the way everything looks. I mean, buildings are gray a lot of the time, like school buildings, and office buildings, and the kind of light they have on the ceiling isn't necessarily, like a beautiful sunlight. And it's almost like there's a war. And then, of course, there's politics, where imagination can be manipulated and misused to control people or manipulate people. And over time, it gets lost, people forget, or they're watching TV instead of reading, Nothing wrong with watching Star Trek, You need to also turn it off and just look around the room and imagine life, So it's almost like there's a war on the imagination. The more imaginative and creative and thinking people are, the less good it is for those who might want to manipulate a certain, result for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like your responsibility. It's like our responsibility to, think back. It's another exercise people can do. Think back to maybe, even if it's a children's story, some kind of story or something that you experienced and loved when you, like the movie you saw and then redirected, and just put yourself there. Think about it. Now we've changed, our brains also change, the brains fuse, things change in our minds. And so we have to reawaken it and kind of sometimes work at it, to get our imaginations flowing again. Mythologies, the great fantasy stories are a really good way of waking it back up. I read some Lord Dunsany or H.P. Lovecraft or Tolkien, or Lloyd Alexander, who's one of my favorites, because he really cornered. We talked about that. There's a video you can see, Lloyd Alexander. He wrote the Chronicles of Prydain, Prydan, and he talked about how for many years he wrote books for adults, and it's all good. But when he started writing what they call young adult books, he said that the emotions and everything was deeper and more powerful and clued in, to everything that was going on. And those are the books he's most famous for. So I definitely identified with that. My audience for my stories, adult fantasy lovers is one of my prime, audience goals. They said that those are the people who can really benefit from it. It's for everybody, but that's a big part of my audience.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christopher, for sharing the quote and really taking the time to explain it such that we really, really understand what it means to live with a little more imagination. What's one piece of advice you will want to leave with my listeners? Want them to take away from this episode?
Well, I think I've given a lot of advice already.
Yeah.
So I would just turn off the TV and read, and listen. Put on music, a great, like really cool music. Like I love Stravinsky, like the Firebird Suite or something really wonderful, whatever you like. And just move around your house, dance a little bit, get out of your thinking, worrying brain and get into your imaginative life. And it's just going to do wonders for you, I believe. And curative factor. It's going to help you in health-wise, mental health, physical health, and on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Where can listeners learn more by you and your book and the other things you work?
Say again?
Where can my listeners learn more about you and your book and the other things you work?
Yes. Well, I have an online store called, at kaufmantales.com, KAUFMANTALES. And there's all kinds of, all my works, which Tales of the Ocean City, and I have books for younger folk, the Fantastic Zoo and the Musical Forest. But then you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Sound Artists, SOUND, Sound Art Us. And I have movies of my works that have come to life. A lot of my pieces are like books and live shows and all this, and I have films and lots of visual with the music to experience. And my environmental works are up there to experience. So I would go there. And then if you want to see everything that I do, my home website is soundartist.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Once again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you and a privilege to hear you give this quote and explain it for me. Yeah. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.